Okay, we're good to go. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. I think last week was a pretty emotional week in terms of hearing from people across the country who were affected by residential schools and the history of that. So I think that that's something that hopefully will make us rethink how we operate. I'm going to go straight to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Ryan. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? And the motion passes. So we'll go to approval of the minutes. Does anyone have questions, Ryan?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just moving approval.
Oh, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And the motion passes. So we're moving to presentations to the committee. Oh no, we're moving to new business, I guess. Unless we have business arising, I don't see anything. So I will ask Deputy Superintendent Whitten to introduce the student representative.
Thank you, Trustee Ferris. We did have a meeting this evening with the whole of our student representative group. However, they are very busy individuals, as you can imagine, and one was not able to make it to this evening's meeting. So we don't have a student rep for tonight, but we had a fulsome conversation earlier this evening with all of them on the Zoom.
Well, that's good to hear. Disappointing for us. It would be great to be able to see a live student body other than my granddaughter. So let's go to Deputy Superintendent Whitten, if you would introduce Principal Hovis.
I'll actually pass it over to Deputy Superintendent Colin Roberts, if he would like to introduce District Team Principal Hovis and the team he is so fortunate to get to work with.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Yeah, it is indeed my pleasure to welcome to the meeting David Hovis, Charmaine Short, and Lindsay Swan, who have been working very hard on one aspect of our strategic plan and our framework for enhancing student learning. So without any ado, I shall hand it over to David, and welcome and thank you to the three of you.
Thank you, Colin. Can everyone hear me? Yep, great. I'm just going to share my screen with you, so give me a second. Let's see if can you see that? Everyone can see that? Perfect. Okay. So thank you so much for having us here this evening. The district team, as Colin mentioned, would like to share with you a literacy framework for the 2020-22 school year that supplements and supports the work that is taking place in our schools. And the framework is grounded in a spiral of inquiry, the early learning framework, and the first principles of that learning is holistic and relational. Move on to Lindsay.
Right, so thank you. So as we continue to action the strategic plan, these were some of the guiding questions for our planning in relation to the framework. So how do we support our schools? Our aim is prioritizing connection and belonging in all our learning spaces before launching into skill-based learning. How do we address individual school and community needs? We want to be flexible and responsive to schools and the needs that arise. How do we support all learners? We want to be taking an inquiry stance when we meet our learners for the first time. We want to ask ourselves, what's going on for our learners and what do they need from us? How do we address the inequality of outcomes for diverse learners in literacy? Again, we want all learners to feel capable, and we want to make sure we're building upon strengths. The next question is, how do we address the inequity of outcomes for Indigenous learners in literacy? So we will lean into culturally responsive pedagogy to help all students see themselves in their learning. We want to see learning as windows and mirrors. So windows where students have the opportunity to learn and dive into exploring new ideas, but also mirrors where students learn about themselves, their histories, and that they're reflected in their learning. How do we address the inequity of outcomes for child and youth in care? So again, finding ways to erode discrepancies in educational outcomes and by supporting all students in reaching their goals. Over to Charmaine.
Thanks, David. Thanks, David. Lindsay, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. I'm going to read this slide. I belong. I see myself in this learning. I feel connected and safe. I am capable and full of potential. And as we set out to consider a literacy framework, it was really essential to build from a platform with these anchor statements. And these aren't just words, these are actions. And as we read and read these words, just you can picture the little ones in your mind as I do, and just imagine the ones that would be left behind if this wasn't central to all the work we do. What we know is that all learners need to feel connected to their learning. And we know that social emotional wellness and belonging is integral to academic success. So the professional learning and collaboration that's embedded into this framework really is about the holistic process of getting to know our learners, what's in front of us, and what do we do next. And I think it's important to note that sometimes these components don't seem as tightly concrete and tightly packaged as we're used to. And I think it's really important that we recognize that's very intentional, because we want very much to make this all very responsive to what's going on in the classroom at that time and how we can best serve our students. So for every student to access and flourish literacy learning, they need to feel open to new learning. And many students come to school that way, rooted and ready, and that's not the case for every learner. So this framework aims to serve all. And that we do that by starting with belonging and making sure that we are addressing inequities in the literacy outcomes by prioritizing how students feel, how they feel about learning, how they feel about school, how they feel about themselves as a learner, and prioritizing the time to do that before moving into the layers of literacy. And really helping our educators notice the barriers that are maybe getting in the way of that access to the learning, and how we can work to reduce and hopefully eliminate barriers so that every child gets what they need to move towards their potential. So as we action this framework, we really are prioritizing time and opportunity. First, to connect with our students, and then layer in the literacy learning and allow for each student's potential to be illuminated, and the strengths of and interests of our students really become central to the work. And we just want our educators to have that unwavering belief that all learners have potential, and that's our role as we move through the literacy learning. And David, I think if you just move the slide to the next one is
Perfect. Right, so we recognize that literacy learning is the collective responsibility of our entire learning community. And with this in mind, we are working alongside our Indigenous Education Department, Inclusive Education Department, district team, and schools to support literacy learning for all learners. And our work is guided by the following framework. So the first People's Principles of Learning, the Early Learning Framework, and as well as the Children and Youth in Care report, How Are We Doing? Thanks. So we ask ourselves, in terms of building capacity, how is literacy framework? How's our framework connect every adult role in the building? Building collective capacity will involve learning at all levels of our system. To continue to close the gap for all learners, shifts in thinking and doing are necessary throughout our learning community. We recognize that there's incredible work and commitment from our teachers, our EAs, and school staffs in all areas of learning, including literacy. So therefore, we're going to draw on the expertise of our schools and build on the existing capacity to improve the equity of opportunity for all learners. Next slide, David.
Thank you. This framework across all components and layers invites time, as I mentioned, for collaborative conversations and next step choices to be made. And the framework encourages more connection and more collaboration, more people-to-people work, which is definitely something we're all starved for. And that includes like student-to-student collaboration, teacher to student, teacher to teacher, and the work that we do collaboratively, all layers collaborating. And the funding for this framework is really targeted to provide the time and invite that collaboration. So often these pieces have been done sort of after the bell, and just embracing the importance of that and bringing it into the work we do every day. When we know better, we do better. And so we have so much to gain from each other. And if we allow for time to collaborate, we all become better educators, learning from each other and growing from our strengths. And collaboration can include professional dialogue and inquiry about facets of literacy learning, or even specific classroom complexities that someone might be facing, coming together and brainstorming on where to go next. All of this is just geared towards being responsive to what's going on at the time in the classroom. And it will have a very big impact on an improved student learning. So the school teams who are involved in the collaboration will work together in recurring cycles of inquiry, asking themselves, what is going on for our learners? How do I know? And what are the next steps? So just that coming together and sharing and asking each other and learning from each other. And this process of collaboration, brings us right back to what I talked about at the beginning. Just it also filters down to our educators' sense of belonging and connecting with each other and building their strengths and capacities. So at all layers, this is very interconnected. Thanks, David.
So we have some overarching goals, and these are similar to our guiding questions, but we felt it was important to reframe these into some goal statements. The first goal is to improve literacy outcomes for all learners by addressing unique strengths and the needs of each school community. The next goal is to address the inequity of outcomes for Indigenous learners, children and youth in care, and students with diverse learning needs in literacy. Again, this is done through prioritizing that connection and belonging for all students and getting to know our learners and the needs, as well as wrapping around our administrators, our staff and students to build that culture of belonging and safety. We want to ensure that students see themselves in the books that they read and the learning that they do. We want to make sure that we're being culturally responsive in all of our learning moves. The third goal is to increase the collective efficacy through embedded school-based collaboration, as Charmaine's mentioned. We've seen that collaboration it's one of the underpinnings of this framework, and we recognize that when we learn from each other, we all improve. And the last goal here is to broaden knowledge of evidence-based instructional strategies. We want to model and offer learning about best practice and what works best for all learners.
So as we look at the comprehensive literacy framework, we're just going to go through the different components of that for you. In keeping with these goals from the preceding slide, exploring the model, the focus again is the district team working alongside our principals and vice principals, early literacy collaboration teachers, we're calling ELCTs, literacy collaboration teams, new career teacher professional learning, early years literacy through play, reading recovery and lead teacher consortium supports, and then literacy focused webinars. So with our district team working alongside our principals and vice principals, as a team, we continue to support our admin colleagues as we work alongside them in school communities and providing professional development and learning in our level of meetings. Our early literacy collaboration teachers. So in addition, we've got 4 1.0 FTEs that have been placed into schools. And those schools in working alongside the GDTA were identified as Vic West, Macaulay, George J, Quadra, Cloverdale, Oakland, South Park, and James Bay. So we have these folks working full-time in those schools and focusing to support students who we identify as tier 3 or tier 2 supports and needs and being responsive to them, and working alongside their school-based teams to identify which classrooms they're going to be working in. And again, with that work, they're building collaborative capacity with classroom teachers and building connections, networking, and also attending regular scheduled meetings with our district team on a weekly basis and spending time with us. The next component is literacy collaboration teams. So this one is the purpose is to grow the collaborative networking within the district and schools, and in turn build collective efficacy and capacity in literacy teaching and learning. Sessions will be led by the district team and a provincial literacy consultant, and you might be familiar with her, and her name is Faye Brownlee. So Faye is going to be working alongside our team with these sessions. And again, the nice piece to this is that as a responsive measure that each school will receive up to $4,000 in funding for collaborative work and to purchase items such as classroom books and literacy resources. Collaboration time is embedded to allow for integration of inquiry and reflection into practice. And teachers will have the opportunity to share literacy updates with school community and district learning team. Collaborating with colleagues through the inquiry process. And collaboration can look like in a school, co-teaching, learning rounds, proficiency pilot work, and personalized Pro-D. The next component is new career teacher, building a literacy learning network. So creating a community of learners through connection and setting up your classroom for differentiated instruction and culturally responsive engagement. Finding the entry point for each learner, opportunities for formative assessment, looking at running records and responding to data. And what happens when behavior gets in the way of our careful thought plans in literacy? Looking at those questions, inclusive practice for language learners or ELL and French immersion, and evidence-based strategies for reading and writing instruction and integrating talk and oral language into all that we do. I'm just going to ask Charmaine. Charmaine, was there anything else you wanted to add to that piece?
I think you did a great job, David.
Okay. The next one is early years literacy through play. So learning and sharing sessions to explore how play and story making can be a powerful way to motivate talk and oral storytelling, as well as a natural entry point to writing. Participants will be provided with opportunities to observe and practice that empower all learners to feel confident in moving from play to pencil. At school, we want to ensure all learners have access to engaging, playful learning to help them reach their full potential, both personally and academically across our district. This series is a direct support for primary educators who are trying to shift their practice to be more play-based. Current research and experience informs us that by increasing opportunities for students to learn through play, we enhance their social and emotional well-being and academic outcomes. Another outcome, or another component rather, is reading recovery and lead teacher consortium supports. So as you know, that there were 2 schools that received additional funding for reading recovery this year. That's Tillicum and Craigflower. There are also currently 4 other schools that are continuing with reading recovery at this point, and it's View Royal Elementary, Campus View, South Park, and Strawberry Vale. And so that work continues, and with support from the consortium leads. In addition to our reading recovery leads that we share with SUC and Saanich are supportive of sharing the strengths of reading recovery program with classroom teachers through professional learning and co-teaching opportunities. In a train-the-trainer model, 6 SD61 current and formerly trained reading recovery teachers have stepped up and will be participating in a series of workshops and training alongside our reading recovery leads as they learn to adapt reading recovery techniques for primary classrooms or small group instruction. My understanding is that they'll begin with a series of interactive writing sessions, and then this model will also be conducted in both the Saanich and the SUC school districts. So we've got all 3 districts that are also going to be doing this work together. And just also a note, as we look at reading recovery, we also have schools like Tillicum and Craigflower that are also doing other components of the collaborative literacy framework and also doing work around early literacy collaboration, or sorry, not early literacy collaboration, rather literacy collaboration teams. And some of those teachers are participating in new career professional learning and also early years through play. And then the last piece we wanted just to draw your attention to is literacy focused webinars. So these are a series of after school Zoom sessions with a literacy numeracy connection for both primary and intermediate teachers, led by Victoria teacher Nikki Lina. And these will also be recorded and archived so that folks that weren't able to attend will be able to view those on our district website. So in providing these offerings, we've sent information out to teachers and colleagues in schools, and the registration levels reflect the passion and commitment of the teachers in the district. We're really excited to note that thus far we have 16 school teams who have signed up for the Literacy Collaboration Series with Faye Brownlee. We have 26, I think we anticipated about 24, but we have 26 new career teachers that have signed up for the new career sessions. The early literacy through play sessions, we have 44 teachers signed up. And then the after school webinars, the literacy numeracy series, we have 84 teachers that have signed up for those series. So I think that's some really exciting news.
So this brings us to the close of our presentation, but we want to say that, you know, as we move through the thick of this pandemic, we recognize that for some students and teachers, the light in their eyes may have been dimming a little, but we hope this framework reflects a responsiveness to that reality, the reality that these are challenging times for our one learning community. So we've prioritized coming together by inviting collaboration to our system. We've prioritized capacity building to honor and place value on the incredible strengths and competencies in our school. And most importantly, we are guided by the First Peoples principles of learning, which recognize that learning takes patience and time. It takes patience to learn about each other and to stand one another, and also time to connect, time to collaborate, and time to discover and even rediscover the joy of literacy learning. So thank you all for listening.
Well, that was great. Andy, could we go back to our full screen here? Great. Do we have any comments or questions, Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks to the entire team. That was a fantastic presentation. I really appreciated the depth of detail, and I'm really impressed with the comprehensive literacy framework piece, really laying that down for us so we can see the myriad of ways that we're providing comprehensive literacy support across the district. I actually have just a couple questions, and my first one is in terms of our overarching goals. When we look at inequality of outcomes with, for Indigenous learners in the district, children, youth, and care, students with diverse learning needs, there's obviously intersections between all of those. Some that can blend different kinds of learning challenges together. And I think particularly about it's Dyslexia Awareness Month this month. Dyslexia is a particular and high prevalence challenge. So I'm wondering through you, Chair, to the team, if they could comment on our approach to all of these myriad challenges that come together, and how we're looking to address those specifically when it comes to closing that learning gap. Because we do have a learning gap there, especially with Indigenous learners and children, youth in care, diverse learning needs, and how those intersect. It's a big question. I don't expect a definitive answer, but I guess just some thoughts would be appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody care to answer that question? David, do you want to take a run at
Well,
that?
you're right, Ryan. It is a big question, and I think the important piece is the work that we do. I think in our classrooms, really, I think as we look at those specific students, I think, and being specific in terms of targeted instruction for those folks, I think the hope is always that we're going to support all learners in the classroom. So I think what we do for a few students, I think hopefully that supports all the learners within the context of the classroom. And we know that there's going to be a need sometimes for differentiated instruction and targeted instruction. And sometimes that's reflected in a student's IEP and specific goals to that particular child. But I think, again, that responsiveness and that responsibility for us to really look at what are our students' strengths and start with strengths-based, and what are the areas that we can really focus on in terms of needs and where we need to focus on growth for those particular children and being responsive to those actions. So I think, again, depending on the individual child, that might look differently from student to student.
Thank you, David.
A brief follow-up, if I may, Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. My other question was, around obviously the work that we're able to do in school is obviously and can be greatly augmented by the work that is done at home and through supports at a home environment. But obviously different home environments vary in terms of the capacity to support. So I'm wondering what kinds of engagement the team does in terms of supporting our students when they leave our classrooms to go home and kind of continue on that learning process in kind of the variety of home-based supports that do exist.
Charmaine, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I'm happy to speak to my own experience, but I think definitely when we're working with our new career teachers, that is something I think is really valuable to share and learn together because it really is building that community with your families. And we're not just getting to know our children, but that's included, their families are included in that. I think we're really fortunate in this day and age with all of the digital platforms that allow teachers to share what's going on in the classrooms and bridge conversation openers with snapshots of the learning that's taking place, and then bridging that into for follow-up, ask your child, so bringing the philosophies that the pedagogies you're sharing in the classroom and bridging that into the home through those platforms like Fresh Grade. And I think websites, lots of teachers have classroom websites and communication just through newsletters and so on. But I do think you're right. And that's the work we do a lot in the early years is building that capacity right from the get-go. So parents are feeling involved in their child's learning right from the tender age of 4.
Thank you, Charmaine, and thank you, Ryan, for the questions. I had just one comment, and then I'll have Shelley and Rob, and that was that I love that idea that students see themselves in learning. That really came home to me. I remember years ago when I was doing a different type of teaching, one of the things that I always focused in on right away with a new student was get this person to see themselves doing it. And that's so important. I love the idea. So I had Shelley.
Yeah, I just want to support the conversation that's happening, because the work through David and Lindsay and Charmaine, they have spent an incredible amount of time, just to kind of echo with Ryan's questioning, with our department over the last few weeks, as they've been starting to get the momentum going, really, as it relates to what does it mean to be culturally safe and how do we build that into this practice? What does it look like to make it meaningful and relevant for Indigenous learners, and who do we need to connect with in community that can assist us with that? So I feel like there's just such a great thread of connection that's happening between district team, our team, and us as a large family, as we're starting to kind of fall through those threads coming forward now as this framework's coming out. And so we've been looking collectively together as a family. So I think it's really good that you asked the question, Ryan, because it allows us to also echo kind of what we've been discussing together, as well as we're looking at all the little pockets of the very different student populations that we're serving. And so we may just be one part of that, but definitely we feel like we're part of the conversation. And I think that, you know, David and the team that they're working on have done a really good job to bring us through, and we don't feel that that's absent. So that's important.
Thank you for that, Shelley. Yes, I think we see you as a very vital part of this conversation. Rob Painter. Rob?
God, that's got to be a couple bucks in the unmute jar. So thank you, Chair. I'll try again. Through the chair to Principal Hovis. Actually, Hovis? Hardo? My apologies there. Principal Hovis. The 4 1.0 FTEs, I was trying to get that list down of schools. Yeah. And I got Vic West, Macaulay, George J, Quadra. What was I missing?
So I'll just go through it again for you. It's Macaulay. So 1.0 is shared between Vic West and Macaulay. So it's one teacher that goes between those two schools, right? We have one teacher that goes between Quadra and Cloverdale. One between Oaklands and George J, and one between James Bay and South Park. And so depending on kind of a conversation with that teacher and the admin teams and the school communities there, they've kind of created a schedule. So it may be, them going for 3 days to one school and 2 days for another. It just depends in terms of what that assignment looks like. So some schools will receive a 0.6, some schools receive a 0.4, some schools received a 0.5 FTE, and that was in consultation with our GVTA partners.
And is the expectation then that, next year we'll probably be looking at those positions at different schools, or is the expectation that they would stay because these are schools where we need to provide additional support?
So they're district positions, but they're full-time in schools, right? So they're full-time in schools, that they're so there is that flexibility, I think, in through conversations and discussions, I think, with with the board, I think with our GVTA partnership, in terms of looking at if we keep those folks in schools, in the same schools for the following year. I know that in conversations that I've had with folks like Faye Brownlee, who I don't know if you know, Rob, who she is, but she's been doing this work in our province for many years and working at the provincial level with the government as well. And she really talked about, this kind of running 2 to 3 years in schools to really make that significant difference. So I would hope that with the funding being there for next year, that would continue probably in the same schools for next year as well, just so that we would see that significant change. So I think we'd need 2 to 3 years to see that change in those schools, and then make a decision from there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I could continue, the schools that have decided to maintain reading recovery are View Royal, Campus View, Strawberry Vale I had, and there was a fourth one in there.
So let me just grab my notes. So Campus View Royal, South Park, and Strawberry Vale.
Okay, and then if I could ask a more general question. Certainly the issue of inequities in learning outcomes is a huge deal for those of us on the board. And so and I recognize that we're not looking for a cookie cutter situation, that different schools, different communities are going to require different kinds of support. But trying to address engagement through this program, it seems like in the past number of years, we've been working on improving student connection and engagement broadly across the district. And now there's the three of you plus the 4 FTs in the schools who are trying to deliver this. And it just seems like a huge task to try to put on your plate. So am I missing something in terms of the scope of what you're trying to address?
I'm not quite sure in terms of the scope. So maybe unpack that for me a little bit more, Rob.
Well, it seems like this is something that through different initiatives in the time that I've been a trustee, that there's been a lot of effort put towards this. And it was my understanding that those efforts were focused at a broader district level base. So, getting all presumably school administrators involved, for example, and having them all work on with staff to address engagement and connection issues. And so what I'm just trying to understand right now is this something that your team itself is going to be trying to focus on, or are you still working, are you just kind of taking up the torch and carrying on with all school administrators right across the district, all staff, to address this issue? Because otherwise it seems like almost unfair to give you such a large job to undertake.
It is a big job, but again, I would say that we're doing this alongside our teachers and our EAs, our administrative colleagues. I think we're helping to lead some of this work, but it's in support and alongside those folks in their buildings. When we think about the literacy collaboration teams, for example, that's teams teams in schools that are doing some of that work and attending sessions with Faye, and then doing some of that collaboration work collectively inside their buildings or in their buildings. So I think we're providing a framework and a structure, and I know that Charmaine's leading a few, and we're coming alongside and supporting Faye in a few things. But it is, I think, a larger team effort, and us providing that framework, I think, of support in terms of how we can kind of guide the work in the district. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Thanks for your
I think as well as I can craft a question for you, I think that's answering it. And then lastly, there was
I wonder if somebody else could ask a question, Rob. Is that a possibility?
Oh, certainly. My apologies. I didn't see other hands.
I'm just going to ask Diane McNally to speak if I can.
Thanks, Chair. I have a question about the reading recovery comments. I'm really glad to see, as you might guess, more schools than 2 being able to provide this amazing intervention that really provides documented results for children. I'm trying to get my head around the affordability part, though. My understanding is that the 2 schools, Craig Flower and what was the other one? Telecom, have their teaching component half paid for by the district and half paid for by the school, which is the standard model. And the schools have to decide if they want to spend some of their budget for half a teacher. So those schools did. But then there were 4 more, I understood, which just made my heart jump with joy. But I'm wondering how they are paying for their teacher, because it's half a day of a teacher out of a school. Is it out of a school-based budget? How are they doing it? You understand what I'm asking? That
No,
sounds like a
I believe so.
convoluted question, but I hope I was
No,
clear.
my understanding is that would be from their SBIL budget. That would be from their inclusive ed budget. That
SBIL, I'm sorry.
So that their budget where their learning support funds come from, that would be earmarked. So that component would be used, and I'm looking to Deb here or Colin, but I understand it would be coming from that budget.
Thank you.
In a school's budget.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Rob, you had another question?
Yes, if I may, Chair. I was trying to get a sense of how you anticipate tracking results. And I understand quantification is difficult when you're applying varied approaches elsewhere, but how are you going to be able to tell and let us know that this is making a difference?
Yeah, good question. You know, and I think as we really thought about this and thought about that exact question that you've just asked us, when it comes to our 8 schools that are receiving the funding through the early literacy collaboration teachers, we are going to have some baseline data, and we're going to be using, we have our learning app that was developed several years ago, if you might recall, or I think it used to be referred to as the literacy app. And so we're going to be collecting data and information, I think, from that, and collecting that information to see progress and mark progress. So we will have that, and we can come back, you know, maybe later on in the year and share that information with you. With the other schools, it's a little bit more of a challenge in terms of how do we collect data and what does that look like. And so what we thought about with the literacy collaboration teams in schools is using something called the spiral of inquiry. And so that would be developed, I think through kind of an inquiry question. And that would really look, it would probably be different from school to school in terms of basically, what is their focus? What is their hunch? You know, what are they going to target on, and how do they know what they're doing is going to make a difference? So we'll kind of have anecdotal information. I think referencing it as street data, if you will, and looking at that piece in terms of looking at how we know that that's what they're doing in the schools is making a difference. But we'll have some data that we can look at through that learning app that we'll collect, and then others will be anecdotal information, street level kind of data that we can then look at and reflect on, and on what teams have done in their schools and how do they know they made a difference.
Great, thank you, David.
Thank you.
I think seeing no further questions, we'll go to Andy Canty to talk about the Zoom license for PAC.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a quick update in response to looking into licensing for parent advisory council members. Obviously, we want to do as much as we can to support our PAC partners. It is challenging, however, after review, the way that we license Zoom, and in the back end, the Microsoft licensing is all tied into our employee and human resources system. So for staff, basically. This makes it quite challenging to kind of come up with a funded model to license PAC members who are not staff members. We did look at, the pricing is very different, obviously, to what is offered. For example, Zoom currently offers a $240 per license per year. Microsoft 365 license is currently their first level, $79 per year, which includes Microsoft Teams, the equivalent to Zoom video conferencing. And again, educational licensing is far less than that, thankfully. The one free option we did note was Google Meet, which obviously the prevalence of Gmail as a mail client. It does offer up to an hour, which is a little longer than the basic kind of 40 minutes for Zoom licensing. We also noted that the BCC PAC, the BC Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils, are currently offering a single shared license to district PACs for which would allow 2 concurrent Zoom meetings with unlimited minutes. And it looks like, from what I've read, that is part of the provincial education agreement. So that's been negotiated with the Ministry of Education. So not possibly the update our VCPAC members were looking for, unfortunately, in terms of the complexity of having to create a staff account and license. It would go beyond our current license agreement for Microsoft and for Zoom under the provincial agreement that we're part of. I would offer out there as a possibility, if the board wish to advocate to extend the provincial agreements for Zoom and for Microsoft, because it sounds like there's been some discussions in that avenue already. That could be an option to advocate to extend it to further licensing, because one license per district PAC to share with school PAC meetings obviously has its limitations. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andy. Rob?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, one thing that I guess I'm looking for confirmation. In this case, when we talk about licenses, are we talking about a specific PAC? Like, there's no way for us to bundle the PACs together under the auspices of VCPAC or something like that to be more cost effective?
Thank you, through the chair. Our current licensing through SD61 is through a school district agreement with the purchasing and focused education through the Ministry of Education. And that does have stipulations around what our staffing numbers are and how we track and maintain staffing numbers, and what our student headcount is for the student licensing. So I'm not sure if our VCPAC representative is better to answer that question.
Perhaps, Chair, if I could just clarify my intent, and then I'll get out of the way. What I was wondering is that in this case, when the term license is mentioned, is that indicative of one license per PAC, or there is no way to group those into units of some sort? And that's where I meant under VCPAC to, just be more cost effective. That's all. Thank you.
Oh, through the chair, I think I see what you mean. The way we're currently licensed in the district is a named license. So we need to assign it to a named member of staff with a SD61 email address. It looks like the BCC PAC licensing is potentially a license that could be shared from the information I read on their website. But our current licensing is not a group or a bundle license. It's each license is assigned to a name, a member of staff.
Thank you for that clarification, Andy. Seeing no further questions, I'd like to go to Superintendent Whitten.
I think, excuse me, Chair, I think VCPAC representative.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. I didn't see that. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, through the chair, we do have some comments and a question. So VCPAC has purchased a Zoom license for our members to use, as long as it's a staggered use. Our concern is, though, that we should be advocating for PAC Zoom licenses to be extended through the school year, for the simple fact that it's safer. Not only is it convenient for us, and you have to think, we need every school in the district to meet with us. And so we obviously can't meet in person. And so Zoom has been so helpful and to keep our COVID protocols in place. And also the question, I guess, through the chair would be, is it possible for administration to allow their PACs to use their Zoom licenses, given the fact that an administration person needs to be present at a PAC meeting? would it be so difficult for the admin Zoom license to be allowed for that PAC to use? Because we really do want to stress how much safer it is to be able to use Zoom in a pandemic time, and that we are able, because as parents who work and volunteer, for us to be able to do this from the comfort of our own home is monumental. So yes, could we please advocate, and are we able to ask administration to kind of help out until we have figured out a more solid path forward? Thank you, Chair.
Andy, do you have any answer to that first or second question, I guess?
To the second question, through the chair, the way that staff access the Zoom licensing is through something called single sign-on. So it's a personal, it's our staff network credentials, which would not be able to be shared. The only way that I could see staff being able to facilitate PAC meetings is if they schedule them themselves and administer the meetings themselves. But from a license sharing point of view, our license and data governance does not allow, because it would mean the sharing of credentials for a number of services wider than just the Zoom account.
Thank you for that, Andy. Rob Painter, you have another question?
Well, just to follow up on what Angela was just saying, if the principal, the administrator of the school, is present for PAC meetings, is it not possible for the principal to be the one to sign on and issue the meeting invitation, and then the PAC itself can get together on that meeting, or on that meeting that's been, where the invitation's been offered? If I understand correctly, they would not, it's not a matter of everyone who's part of a Zoom meeting has to be able to use a single sign-on, if I understand. It's the one who's inviting people to the meeting? Thanks, I hope that's...
Through the chair, on that last technical point, that is correct. It is the host that requires the license and the person administrating the meeting. And I would refer the first part of your question to our senior leadership team.
Right. Do we have it? Yes, Superintendent Whitten.
I think we can explore that with our principals and vice principals. As you've mentioned, they typically attend the PAC meetings, but I wouldn't want to speak for them as to sometimes they alternate between the vice principal or principal attending. And in this instance, to make it more complicated or confusing to have who is the host and who's attending and not, but we'll bring it up with the principals and vice principals just to seek clarity.
Thank you for that. We'll now move on to the local education agreement, C4. Yes, thank you. Deputy Superintendent Whitten.
This is also, I'll invite Colin to introduce it with Dr. Nimi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Nimi and I would like to speak briefly about the local education agreement that the district has been working on along with representatives of the Esquimalt Nation. As you can see, starting on page 16 of the pack-up, there is a recommended motion that we're hoping can be approved at the full board meeting later this month. Before I turn things over to Dr. Nimi, I'd like people to know that the Chief and Council of the Esquimalt Nation have had an opportunity to review this draft. Trustees will be very familiar with the document because it's, although it does differ from the local education agreement that we have with the Songhees Nation, there are very, very many similarities. And as you peruse the document, you will see a couple of areas that are highlighted in yellow, particularly down where we refer to tuition payments. that really is probably one of the less important aspects of the document from an educational perspective, in that it really is just talking about the way in which the tuition payments would be processed that the district and the nation receives from government. And so as things stand, the district has played a lead role in the accounting measures. That is something that may change in future years, and the Esquimalt Nation may take over that lead role. But we've highlighted that in yellow as something that could change, but won't have a substantive impact in terms of the services that are provided to students. So the core of the document, well, if approved by yourselves and by the Chief and Council of the Esquimalt Nation, will remain as it is. So, well, with that introduction, I would ask Dr. Shelley Neely if she has more that she could add.
Sure. I want to thank Colin. There's a whole bunch that I want to say, so I'm just going to take a moment because I just want to really highlight the significance of this. This is an intention to put forward this to the public board meeting to be a motion to be received by the board. This is the very first local education agreement that School District 61 will have with the Esquimalt Nation, and the thought and the care and the conversations I think that took place over the last year as it relates to the development of this local education agreement truly is reflected in the document that you see before you, including what Colin, Deputy Superintendent, has highlighted for us tonight, even in the consideration of that. And so I think that there's been a lot of thought, a lot of care, and I want to go through to the chair that if it goes through to the public board meeting, that the recommendation also come forward that the invitation is extended to Chief Rob Thomas and to the members that they see would want to be present in that board meeting as we go through that, because this is significant. It is incredibly honoring and humbling, I think, for me to be able to witness the conversations that took place, but also for us to be at this moment in time. And so I think this document not only defines the relationship that we're intending to be in with the community, but also it's a document that we don't want to live on a shelf. It's a document that we need to breathe life into, and that it really is the stories of the children of the community that we're serving. And so as we do that and we honor that and we hold that space right now together, I think it's significant, and it deserves that honoring to be able to put onto the table today. So I think as you have the opportunity to read through that, or if you have read through that, know that all of that work took place over an entire year, and that it came through, I would say, consensus and support through not only the work that our SD61 family brought forward to the table, but also with a really great due care and response from what the community brought forward for what they believe is the needs that they have for their children. And that's something that we want to honor. And so I want to thank you for that. But I also want to really highlight the importance, right? This is the very first, and we have a responsibility to celebrate that. And so let's start in a really good way.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And yes, I think we would really value seeing Chief Thomas at that meeting. So I'll just read the motion that the Board of Education of School District 61, Greater Victoria, approve the local education agreement with the Esquimalt Nation as presented. And do I have a mover for that, please? Mover Ryan, and seconded by Jordan Waters. Do we have any speakers to the motion? Diane McNally.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of related questions, and in the context of realizing what a great achievement this is. Yes, at 2F, the agreement states that success for the nation's students, promotion of success for the nation's students will occur through regular and ongoing communication between the school district and the nation. And far be it from me to try to drive this bus, but I long for the day when the board can actually meet perhaps as observers with chief and council when they have something relevant to tell us about the education of their students. So I'm just putting that out there, that would be, I think, an amazing confluence of energy for us to actually meet face to face, and I hope someday that will happen. My other question is for 3.0 of the document. There are many strategic priorities and objectives, and I'm wondering if senior staff have a plan for a structured way to report regularly on basically how it's going with all those specific priorities and objectives. That's it.
I can discuss a couple of those points. I think as we start to, so with our local education agreements, I think that we work uniquely with each of our communities as it relates to what their local education agreement says. And I think that through the discussion of this local education agreement, there was thorough consideration as to how that could look, who would be a part of the LEA committee, how would the reporting back and forth look like, how would the relationship be established, who would be meeting, and what would we be meeting about. So it was relevant, completely directed to the community's students that we're serving, the education services that they're buying off of us, and the relationship that they have with the district and the students and the schools that they're attending, and who needs to be involved in all of those pieces, right from a policy governance lens right down to an operational lens. And so I think that there's facets of that in lots of different ways. And I think as we breathe life into this local education agreement, we'll do, I think, the same thing that we've done with Songhees, as we're currently going through that process right now, where we have just had our first meeting with our principals and vice principals who have nominal role children attached to our local education agreement. So we can start to unpack and peel back exactly each of these sections. So then that way we know what our responsibilities are, our communication methods are, our procedures for there. And I think it's going to be clear and come very clear as we go through that process as to what our pitfalls are, where we need improvement. And I think the reporting structure, and I think that was the attempt to be able to make sure that that was even captured in the local education agreement, so it holds us accountable that way. So I think those are really great questions, Diane, and I think that as we start to navigate with the local education agreement committee and team that kind of oversees that oversight of that way we're going to be able to see that regular and ongoing, I think, communication two ways, right? And I think that's the whole, I hope, intent of this agreement in that way. And so it can become very in-timely responsive to the needs of the community versus us being reactive, I guess would be the word.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for asking it.
Thank you for that. And I'll go to Rod Painter.
Chair, I do have a number of questions. So if at any time you think it's appropriate to bring in another person, please just let me know. Okay. Through the chair, strategy 1.1 talks about offering quality daycare programs. Now, is this a reference to Strong Start, or like daycare for me is generally day-long care? And I was just wondering if we have a vision for a broader program than just Strong Start.
Can you define the section? Oh, sorry, through the chair, which section you're looking at so I can pull that up for you?
Yeah, it's on page 6 of the agreement. It's strategy 1.1 in section 3.2.
Perhaps I could help in response to that. There are two elements to that section. One is the strategic plan of the Esquimalt Nation. And the second is, as you're more than well aware, is the district strategic plan. So the section that you're referring to comes from the nation's own strategic plan. And of course, as our goals and desires overlap, we'll certainly assist the nation in whichever way we can. But certainly some of the elements in that document that you see are lesser elements of our agreement with the nation, and more a very direct statement of what they're hoping to achieve through their chief and council and their organizational structures.
Okay, through the chair, thank you very much for that clarification. So if I understand correctly, the entirety of there's two 3.2s, just to let you know. The first 3.2, starting on page 6, that is the Esquimalt Nation's set of strategies and goals. Okay, that helps a great deal. Thank you very much. I'll try to get back to the focus then of the district. I'll yield the floor, Chair, just to get myself to the appropriate point here.
Okay, do we have any further questions? Seeing none.
Okay. Page 8.
This will be coming to the board, Rob, and perhaps you could make some notes and ask us at that point.
Yes, okay. I did have one question of clarification in section 14, and I believe this is school district. So this is on page 12, 14.1. And I appreciate that this it appears to be right out of the provincial template. But one question I had is, it seems to me that consistent with our practices regarding senior administration hires, certainly superintendent, I believe that those senior administration positions should also be considered in here. After all, those are the policy and leadership positions across the district that really play a critical role in terms of First Nation students and access. The other one I was wondering about is that in the past, it's my understanding that we had a BC Human Rights Tribunal exemption to offer preferential treatment for or preferential hiring for First Nations teachers and staff, and that this was consistent with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But when I looked on the Human Rights Tribunal, it appeared that the only exemption that 61 has is with respect to hiring the district principal or coordinator of the Aboriginal Education Department. So that's one of those things that I personally would like to see right across the board, that we are that we have that kind of a allowance. And if that's something that requires a policy proposal on our part, then let me know and I will get to work on that. That was one that I was interested in. And then 16, which talks about the reporting. I would appreciate these ones going to the board at an in-camera session. Now, I certainly understand the need for maintaining privacy, but I think that with respect to the emphasis that Aboriginal education has, not just within our district, but within the ministry as a whole, I think this is critical information for us to be able to access and understand.
Thank you.
That's all, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Shelley, if you'd like to comment on that.
Colin and I think both can take this one. Maybe I'll take it back a little bit to 14.0, and I'll separate the two between an HRT and kind of the pieces that are in here to involve the nation in hiring and what that could look like in those pieces. I think that is what I'm hearing you say is the inclusion. Is there the opportunity to have the discussion to have the inclusion of senior staff being added to 14.0? as a consideration. And that could be something that Colin and I could bring back for sure. And if it does, then it could be amended and coming up forward to the board. So I think what I'm hearing you is that amendment there is that a consideration that we would want to bring forward. The other piece of the HRT is that we actually currently have an expired HRT, but we're in negotiations right now, Trustee Painter, as it relates to the HRT and extending that across potentially multiple different sections across our district, right? Not just to include Indigenous education staff. And so there's conversations about in the preliminary right now with human resources, how does that go beyond not only just what we have as an agreement with GVTA, but what does that look like in relation to all aspects of we looking at our system, and how do we start to influence and enhance those supports? And so I think it's really valid that you bring it forward. I think it's something that we're very aware of and wanting to navigate through, and also involve the four houses within that conversation too, right? Because they're also going to have a vested interest on how we recruit community members into that and how they're reflected in all those pieces. And so working with the administrator of HR right now too, of being upfrontly involved in those conversations. So then that way we can bring them into I would say over the next year. So you're going to see, I would say, over this, hopefully this school year, more conversations coming out to the board in those regards. So I think it's really valid. I think it's important it's asked, and I think it's something that that we're also wanting to explore, but extend beyond just having an agreement with our teachers right now.
As Chair, if I might respond, thank you very much for both of those. And I do appreciate that it's an issue that extends beyond this agreement alone and has to obviously include the four houses. This was just the spark to my curiosity. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. And I think if Colin and I, if you want to share with me in relation to, so when we read it, as it says, the nation, the school, and the district meetings, the board is referencing the legal, like I think the contractual agreement between the board and the nation, and the reporting and the conversations are happening at an operational level, right? And so what that's looking like at some aspects of the day-to-day meetings that maybe the education director is having with school-based principals, our department, and the letters that are coming through informed consent. So there's going to be layers that we're going to see of reporting and things that would happen definitely, you know, as it comes forward to the board, whatever process and structure that is created or that we have in place right now that would allow for, I would say, confidentiality and safety of our learners. We'd always want to keep at the forefront of that, but then also knowing that that some of these are already happening and they're regularly happening, and it just might be the way that it's worded is that this is the board having to facilitate those conversations, but it's really navigating the contract between the board and the nation, and that then the operational conversations are happening day to day. But I'm going to pass it also on to Deputy Superintendent to help assist with maybe extending some of that conversation.
Chair, if I may, I do understand that this is, you know, operational level discussions between district and nation, and I respect that. I'm not trying to suggest that the board in any way is interposed in that. What I did see with this, and understanding the need for privacy, but it does seem to me that the collection of items that are included in this do serve to paint quite a comprehensive picture of the achievement, if I can use that word, of our Aboriginal students. And so to me, I think this would be an excellent way to kind of deal with that group as a whole, recognizing that their well-being and success is a top priority for the board and district as a whole. That's all.
I understand your comment. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions, I'd like to call the question. All those in favor of the motion? And the motion passes. Thank you very much, Colin and Dr. Niemi, for your answering our questions and your comments. And I look forward to seeing this at the board, and certainly hope that we will see Chief Rob Thomas at the board with us when we do that. So from here, I think we're moving on to the adjournment. Do I have a motion? Ryan, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for a very good meeting. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everybody.